So today I'm going to be talking to you about the experience of getting jerked around by a company that was advertising a job that was basically under false advertisement, and how, unfortunately, when you're a young person looking for work and you're under, you're basically told as, a young person, like, take any job, try and do anything you can. Um, and that you're taught to be less than and just accepting of whatever. But when I was in between getting let go from Seven Hills, which happened, like I talked about, just because I didn't have seniority by the time that they needed to start downsizing, it ended up being the case that I was out of work for a period of weeks, and this was my first unemployment period ever. I had been working since I turned 16. I was volunteering at a nursing home, and then I got hired at that nursing home. So literally from 16 to 19 and change, I was like super employable, super always taking every shift, taking a lot of initiative to do extra hours, volunteer, literally going from per diem to part-time to full-time at my first job, and then continuing to work there after I graduated high school, and then working all throughout the summers towards, even into when I was in the massage therapy program, I was still working at the nursing home. And so, like I said, it was my first time being without a job, and I felt really embarrassed. I felt super ashamed. And like I said, because my mom's line of work was everything career oriented, like she basically trained the whole public, not the whole public as not single-handedly, but her job was to train people to dress professionally, to create resumes, to, it was just like such a thing that was such a big part of her life that I really grew up being like, pretending to put like her blazers with like the shoulder pads on to be like, I'm gonna dress up and go to work. And this was at like 10 or, at really young ages. I'd be like, I'm gonna have a desk job and I'm gonna be, I would pose with like my mom's or our like home phone and like take a lot of pride in like goofing off, pretending to be working like on her computer or with my glasses on, and like would make extra effort to just kind of go through those motions because I was excited to get into a place where I could do that. So then, because I was raised to be so professional, so like presentable, so employable, so whatever, and like I said, I already had the understanding of like what you need to dress to do different jobs, what the expectations are to do certain job training programs, and like I really had a really very 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 good understanding of what was available in the area, because this is just stuff that she would come home and talk about, and naturally, like, anyway, so it was very just like by osmosis I got a lot of this information. Was I 19 or 20? I had already moved out, so I believe maybe I was 20 when I got let go. I don't remember exactly, but basically it was just totally devastating because I really enjoyed the people I was working with. I fully, like, I didn't really think that I was going to be there forever, but I did see myself, like, I excelled there. I had a lot of really good contacts that I still have to this day, even though I worked there for like 8 months. I left with like glowing recommendation letters from 3 different parties, not only from my direct supervisor, but also from directors of different departments. And it really was like a sad thing. Like I think, were sincerely sad to like see me go, due to circumstances that they couldn't control either. So I was frustrated. I was already out and in my apartment. Very basically, I think it was like the first year I had moved in. So it was okay, very quickly on my feet. I now need to figure out what I'm going to do to supplement that income that I just lost. Um, I was collecting for a brief period of time, and then I went through the process of going on Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster.com, all these different things that you go through the motions on. Um, this was it was I was getting as much as help as I could from the Career Center, and continually going on like the mass.gov and all these different things. I was rewriting my resume almost every day. Like, I was really hyper focused on like making sure I had a perfect resume. I had several different resumes. I had cover letter templates. I had like 10 different cover letter templates that I was using depending on the type of job that I was applying to, highlighting different elements of what I had done throughout my life up until that point. One focusing on clerical and one focusing more on accounting, highlighting. And I don't need to tell you, like, when you have more different types of documents and you can kind of tailor each cover letter and each resume to the job that you're applying for, it is exponentially harder now because, unfortunately, resumes aren't always read by human beings. Like, there is a very serious uptick in the fact that the hiring process is narrowed down. Like, the applicants are basically submitting everything they can, and then a robot is like filtering through, like, does it have this keyword, does it have this keyword, what location are they in, and like, do they have this degree, does it have the word associates on it, does it have the word bachelor's on it, does it, like, it literally is discarding, auto-discarding, like, things that don't work out and aren't what they're looking for. And I think that there's enormous harm, obviously, being done by that because you're automatically disqualifying that person from a job. And in that, obviously, there's a lot of different errors that bots can make. You can have the wrong type of bot on your Reddit and auto take down posts that don't have anything wrong with them, haven't broken any rules. You can have, posts taken down on Facebook, TikTok, all these different things that don't really have anything in it. It's just like 6 degrees of whatever that program has been designed to look for is like it's stretched itself to find it in your material. And then ultimately that has to be reviewed and disputed, and it's all such a headache. But so yeah, I think that when you lose that human element and you're just like, yes, no, 1 zeros, and you're automatically discarding resumes, people who might be like potentially the best applicants, they just don't have like, maybe they have like a 1.5 years in customer service and you're looking for 2. Like, those are things that a human is going to look at and say, okay, you have the littlest, smallest difference, but yeah, we're going to make sure we proceed with you because you do have all the qualifications and you have that personability and you have that charisma, that you know how to make sales, you know how to deal with customers who aren't that happy. So I did find myself applying sort of en masse, which I know you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to go through carefully and like really select like things that you want to be doing. But I was at that point in my life where I just was, I need to get a job, I need to get a job, I need to get a job. And I actually supplemented this during this time in my life. I wanted to be at work so badly that I was putting on Office television. Like, I would watch The Office, I would watch 30 Rock. I watched all the way through 30 Rock and The Office at least maybe once or twice. And Parks and Rec was the other one. There were just sort of these things that I was doing to sort of be in these spheres of like not losing some of that discipline that comes with like working a 9 to 5 and working like as regularly as you can, because that was the first time in my life I was like categorically in bed depressed, because like specifically like not with a migraine, not with anything, but like I had that such a deflated feeling. I was like, I've done everything correct up until this point. I've done everything I know that I could. This is totally a circumstance that came out of the clear blue sky. And they are there's been a lot of coverage about MLMs. Like there's a John Oliver about specifically MLMs and the problems that they have with their template from the top tier down, and they're really like not designed to be successful for the little guy at the bottom. Like everybody who's on that very bottom layer and isn't like a nationwide whatever or statewide like success story has somebody underneath them, and then they train people underneath them, and then that person trains people underneath them, and then the pyramid is like much more large scale. What is not talked about is when jobs falsely advertise what they are about, what their location is, what those job expectations are that you'll be doing throughout the day. And it's just, this is unfortunately something that I'm sure has happened to, you know, more and different people, probably more frequently now. I think that during the pandemic, there's been such an uptick in the viruses that are going on the computers, because they all know we're on our computer that much more. Obviously, you've seen the hospital systems and the computer systems being held for, held for basically ransom. And there's just so much more of an opportunity when you have a populace that is desperate for work, which unfortunately a lot of people are right now again. You know that there is somebody who will click on whatever, who will apply to whatever, and it's sort of just like they're waiting for that bear trap to be able to just kind of like close right on you. So startups are shell companies. Let me actually pull up the definition. So bear with me for just a second. So startup company, basically every business idea starts as a startup company. The term refers to a company in the first stages of operations. Startups are founded by one or more entrepreneurs who want to develop a product or service for which they believe there is a demand. So the job that I applied to, the job that was posted, was looking for an administrative assistant. And because, like I said, I had done medical journaling, medical charting rather, and I was in that sphere, I was applying to a medical umbrella company that was just looking for administrative assistant. They were marketing themselves as located in the north end of New Bedford. And they selected me for an interview. I think I had a phone interview with them first, and then I had an in-person interview that they asked me to come to Braintree for. And I was like, okay, that seems really random for a job that's supposed to be down the road. So I went, and obviously at this point I was taking the trains and mostly public transportation. Okay, no big deal. I got hired during my in-person interview and was... Sorry, this is just, it's a little bit anxiety inducing even now just to talk about. Just a little bit of a rage inducer because I definitely got completely taken advantage of, and again, I just feel like talking about this and talking about my experiences is going to be beneficial for the next generation to not have to go through, or just to have a little bit more self-awareness going into things. So they said, yes, okay, you're hired, but we need you to go away for 5 days training, so a full week in Worcester. And I said, Worcester? Just, yeah, you know, the location that's going to be in New Bedford is still really brand new, and really what we're going to be dealing with is, like, basically, it was supposed to be a communicative training for me and a couple of the other administrative hires, as well as, like, people who are going to be on staff for, like, CNAs, home health aides under their umbrella, and so on. This is how it was explained to me. And I tried to figure out whatever I could do because I didn't want to lose a job. It was the first person who had gotten back to me, the first set of people who had gone back to me at all in the, you know, tens, hundreds maybe of applications that I had submitted. Probably still, you know, under 100, but just after doing callbacks, and obviously if you've been on unemployment before, you know that you have to keep a job log, so you have to have an email, a person's name that you've spoken to. Sometimes it's a little bit less diligent now, or a little bit less on the word I'm looking for is that they have a little bit more leeway where you can put, like, this is the exact date and time I spoke to somebody on Zoom, or this is the exact date and time I submitted something on a web portal of any kind. You could say, you know, a lot of different things in that vein of, like, more things are acceptable. So it's frustrating to say, okay, I applied to this person 2 weeks ago, I'm going to do a follow-up call, and then, like, sometimes you do multiple follow-up calls in a week or in a day, and then what that turns into, of course, there's no real control that you can exert over that, but basically what that does turn into is you get told no all day long. No, sorry, you don't meet our qualifications. No, sorry, you don't have this certification. No, sorry, you just aren't the right fit for what we're looking for. And unfortunately, it just became... It had been so many, like, said so many times to me that I really started to get like, completely stomach sick about it. And I was like, you know, I'll be damned if I'm gonna lose what might be my only job. I just got, you know, I have this apartment, I have myself to sustain, and, like, obviously it would be a real crying shame to, like, lose those things so suddenly after I had just basically gotten them. And I did what I could. I called a cousin who doesn't live terribly far. She actually worked in basically the same kind of area, so she lived on the T-line, and I was just going back and forth basically as early as I could. I would leave, you know, to start my day, go there for the training, then take the train back to her house, because if I didn't happen to have a relative in the area, I would have been paying an arm and a leg trying to figure out hotel fees, or trying to figure out an obscene amount of, like, there wouldn't have been a way to commute back and forth from where I live to, like, to get into that area where it's Worcester, or, like, some of it was in Woburn, and, like, they switched it back and forth. where it was like, you know, 2 or 3 days are going to be in Woburn, and like these other locations just started like casually being mentioned. So the way that their team mentioned they were going to do things before I even got to the stage of like, yep, I'm going to pack a bags, yes, I accept this training position, is that they had told me that they were going to have, I believe what they had told me initially was that they were going to have 3 days in Woburn and 2 in New Bedford, which is, again, that's the office that I applied for. That's the location that was listed on the job application, or the job posting. So I arrived. The first day seemed relatively normal. Obviously, there's a lot of like packets and different things you're flipping through, you're going over, and I realized like I think there were 5 total, so 4 people with me. And we have people who are on the spectrum of like they're either registered nurses, we have people who are like emergency, you know, EMS response people. And we're all basically around the same conference room getting the same kind of onboarding spiel. And the person who was running it was the same person who had hired me and done my initial interview. So I was like, okay, there's already a little bit of a comfort there. Obviously, they really did like me. And everybody was personable, whatever. So it was basically over the course of like day 2, you know, again, I go from my cousin being in Worcester and like basically doing this L shape, because from Worcester to Woburn is crazy, because it's like a really long commute. And then obviously if you're going from one train to another train, there's train delays potentially both directions. You're waiting an obscene amount of time for like there's just so many exponentially difficult things that you're going through when you're waiting for public transportation. And that's what I was doing at the time, was going back and forth. And at some point on day 2, I was like, okay, so what's going on with, you know, on day 2 over like the lunch break, of at least they were good enough to provide like sandwiches and stuff. I say, okay, so what is the rest of the training going to look like for the last half of the week? And they go, what do you mean? And I was like, I was told that there's going to be 3 days traveling for me, and that 2 are going to be in the New Bedford site at the location listed. Oh no, there's just no way that that's going to be plausible. All 5 days of this training are here. I don't really know who told you that, but da 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 da. And I was like, well, you did. Like, you basically told me that in a very direct way. So in talking with some of the other people, and whenever there wasn't like a staff member of theirs in the room doing training, I was like, okay, there's people here for different locations. Like, we basically discovered that none of us were there for the same location. Like, somebody was going to be in Cambridge and somebody was going to be wherever. And because, again, you don't realize, I just assumed, like, it's not unusual for, like, Steward Healthcare or these larger healthcare umbrellas have multiple locations. Like, there's the South Coast Health System here has Toby Hospital, and, like, all the other big hospitals. So it just really like started to be more concerning to me. I was like, so now I need to go back to my relative I'm staying with, which again was phenomenal of her and her husband, to allow me to stay there. I was like, okay, so is that okay with you if it's, unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to be 3 days, it looks like it's going to be 5 days that I'm here with you. Is that okay? They were saying yes, like there was no problem there, but they were starting to get concerned for me because, like I said, I was very like in starving mode. Like I had been collecting some unemployment, but not really enough to be taking like 2 more days of 10-day train passes or, you know, punch cards for train passes, which are not inexpensive. They're like $20 to load each pop. And then, like you said, with train switches, the Charlie cards weren't really, they were like on the verge of being used. Like maybe they were just starting to be used, but there really wasn't a huge ability to do that in preload. So I'm already of a mindset where like, okay, something doesn't smell right. I'm going to try and wait through this week and do whatever I can. There was another person basically above. I was told like this is the director of the whole tree of programs. And like it's her mastermind, it's her baby, it's her yarn ball that she plays with, or you know, whatever. Like she's basically the mastermind of what she has in charge of everything. And she was the whole time remarkably belligerent, remarkably rude, like very matter of fact, but like in a really pompous way. Like I would bring up concerns sometimes directly to her, and she would make a point of making me look dumb and making other people look dumb for asking regular questions. So that was remarkably off-putting. Because obviously that's not something you take kindly to, so I'm getting increasingly upset. I feel like I've already been lied to. I'm trying to wait through the week, and I'm thinking ultimately once I get to the New Bedford office, I probably wouldn't have to see like these people who are training me basically ever again, because they're going to hire completely new staff for that office. So I'm agitated because they changed their story on me. I'm filling out documents, listening to their spiel, saying like, okay, we're going to, you know, this is our home health care wing, and then this is our like integrated care wing of like things that we're doing. So this is one location, this is the next location, and like for me, I was like, okay, so what's going to be the New Bedford office was being marketed as like it's a mental health location. I was like, okay, well that's good. You know, that's a good thing. There's obviously a lot of a demand for that in the area. So I really didn't ask, I don't think, too many other questions specifically that day. But I'm going through, this is maybe the third day or the beginning of the 4th day. And they say, okay, well, you know, now we're going to do some of your more hands-on job training, but the woman who needs to do that isn't here, so you're going to go meet her in her location. And I was like, what is her location? And this guy says, oh yeah, you need to go to Andover for training. So if you're by chance watching this and you're not familiar with Massachusetts geography, basically New Bedford is like the bottom point. Like New Bedford is not that far from Rhode Island, so it's a bottom point. If you picture like a cross sort of shape, like from Boston to Woburn and then to Andover, which is like literally on the border for like, you're basically not in Massachusetts when you're in Andover, literally on the line. And then Woburn is like a 10 or 20 minute difference in between there. So in between there, you're not taking the commuter rail, you're taking, like, the T and the commuter rail are two different things. And not that that's super critical, but it is two different lines that you're on. So it's two different schedules, two different things that you're now hoping fall into place and align the right way so that you don't have to get to bed at 10 p.m., which is what I did. Like, I was getting in her door at, like, absurd times. So I go back to my cousin. I say, I don't really know what they're trying to pull. I'm really feeling more and more upset about this the more I think about it. Because again, I wasn't really like, I really spent like minimal time with her. I think we went out to like 2 restaurants total, like in the time I was there, and maybe we watched a movie together. But like for the most part, there was so much travel time that there wasn't even time to take care of myself. Like I was getting up and showering at like 4 a.m. to like get up and dress, to be making sure that I was on the first train by like no later than 5:30 or 6 to get to their starting shift time at like, I don't remember, I think it was 8:30 or 9, and then staying there for a 10-hour day, or excuse me, not a 10-hour day, like it's typical, you know, if it was like 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, and then doing the same thing another 2 hours down and around, where you hope that you're getting there by 9, but realistically the trains don't run on time. Like, that's not news to anybody. So I go back to her and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, Andover does have Andover does have a commuter rail line. And I had gone back to my cousin and said, look, you know, basically what I'm going to do is pack up everything I can and then just go up there Friday with my suitcase, because if that's going to be the last day that I'm traveling, I don't want to have to come back to like collect all my things. And I made that decision. I know that you can probably hear my neighbor's dog like freaking out. Unfortunately, they have a Doberman that they really don't take any type of good care of, and just kind of stick outside on freezing cold days like today where we're expecting a blizzard. They leave them outside for long, so this is what we get to deal with. I'm actually going to stop recording until the dog stops barking, because I don't need to subject you guys to this. Okay, so finally I arrived there the Friday. I by no means am graceful. I know that it's cumbersome to arrive with like a suitcase with a jacket to a job training, but there really wasn't any choice, and everybody at the location in Andover was like, it was the only day that I felt happy, and I felt like that first, you know, gauge of like, this is exciting, this is wonderful, this is excellent, and like, okay, maybe this is the part where like all of this was worth it to get here. And like, I was so warmly welcomed by like the staff there. Their office was, you know, not much to look at, but it was, you know, nice, and the management was nice. The woman, there were cubicles in like different areas, so they had a couple different departments, and I was like, great, okay, so I can see this in action. This particular one was like the more like, you know, it was told to me that that was more like their medical billing office location. And I was like, okay, great, like finally something that's a department that I can meet people and kind of look at. But she was saying that they basically, the company that was training us had purchased a pre-existing company, like it was some sort of relatively large bio stuff. So I felt really welcome. It felt like I was not a part of their team, but like, you know, close enough. It happened to be, it was one of those like everything sort of falls. So that again was just sort of the funny thing was that it fell into place. It happened to be, of course, very amazing office situation. It happened to be somebody's birthday that day, so they had like the cake that they do every month and whatever. And so I got to be a part of like their celebration thing, and I was like, okay, great. I got a lot of, you know, I was able to sit with a couple of different people and see like what their computer system was that they were developing and like what I would basically be working on in my location. And I was like, yep, you know, da-da-da. I made it through the day. I took really diligent notes. I had nothing, I still to this day have nothing but positive things to say about those people at the location that I went on that Friday. And I basically was at the point where like I didn't understand why I didn't go there sooner. I didn't really understand like what was going on. I understand obviously like okay, new hires onboard them together, but I didn't understand like why. And I didn't really have the bandwidth to, I just was like, yep, like finally I'm getting training. Finally I'm going to be like, I'm not just, you know, not gonna have a job. Like there's no possible way. Like this, I've seen this thing. It's very real, very tangible. So that made the last few days literally grueling. Literally like trying not to fall asleep while waiting for a train. Like trying not to, you know, keep track of my coat and my luggage and everything else. That, you know, I basically put other people out so that I could do this. And then the end of business day happens on Friday. And the woman who's the head of everything calls a manager that I had met and was friendly enough with at the end of day on at like 5 o'clock on the Friday. Like literally the whole office is putting their jackets on. I'm wrapping up for the day. And like people have their coats on, they're ready to go out the door. There's no more explanation that needs to be going into that, but like it was really like maybe 10 of 5. So she calls, like conference calls this other manager and is basically saying like how did Erin do today, or if she's there, put her on. And so she put her on speakerphone so that the whole room of like me, this manager of this location, and then like the couple, 2 people that had been training me that I had sat with throughout the course of the day. It's like, okay, well, how did, you know, what got done, whatever she sort of relayed. And I really can only like, if you're looking for a visual for this person, like look for like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. Like literally like belligerent, hot-headed, awful, and then occasionally would throw in like sweetie cutie dear, honey, whatever, like colloquialism shit. But like other than that was like off with their heads, like madness all the time. Direct, crass, like really gave me the impression she didn't know what she was talking about. So she calls this other manager and I say, okay, yep, I'm right here. I've been taking consistent, really diligent notes and, you know, all these different things that I've been training on all day. I feel like I have a really good understanding of blank, 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 and I feel like a lot got accomplished. And so she says, okay, well, that's good, and I'm glad that whatever. And it comes up that she, you know, here's what I have to say. She says, just like out of her ass, like she was saying it as if it had always been said to me this whole week. She goes, yep, and you'll be in Andover again on Monday for all of next week. So I'm literally like in my early 20s. in the middle of this office, again, basically with strangers, but like in like literal shell shock because I have already like I had to borrow like $40 from somebody just to cover, like I used my entire unemployment check to go back and forth on like use like a very minimal amount of it on food and like whatever. And if I had needed a hotel, if I didn't have somebody to stay with who was on the T line, I would have been that much more SOL. So I'm sitting in this office like dumbfounded, and I start to like articulate to this woman, I'm like, the very first time I agreed to do this training, I was told it would be like 3 days in one location, 2 days in New Bedford, which is where the job I got hired for is, allegedly. And she goes, well, you know, whatever she said, she was like, well, do you feel ready to like start work? And it basically, like, I actually asked, I was like, is there work to start? Like, is there a location that's ready to start me working? Like, this is the time that you hired me for. This is what you said my alleged first day of work was going to be. Like, I didn't agree to be in one place or another. I didn't agree to the amount of time I had already spent. I certainly didn't agree. Like, Andover had been told to me literally the day before. And I was totally dumbfounded. Again, early 20s, shaking, my whole heart, like, stopped working. My blood ran cold. Like, the whole 9 yards. And I had been, throughout this whole time, I was calling my mom, texting her, being like, I don't know what's going on, like, things are getting different and weirder by the day. And then I had texted her earlier in that day, and I was like, okay, like, things are a little bit less effervescent now, and I feel a little bit more, like, secure, and, like, hopefully this is, you know, gonna stay the course. And again, because of how things went, I basically had already arranged, again, doing public transportation, to leave Andover, get to Andover Station, literally like Google Mapsing everything from my iPhone 4 probably, and like had to search how far it was, basically paying for occasional cabs, like to go from there to the train station. I needed a cab or a Lyft or an Uber or whatever I did. I think it was a cab, but saying, please pick me up here. And like at 5 o'clock, I had called ahead to pick me up at the end of business day, so like 5:15 to get me over to Thing, to basically get on like a 5:30 train and go as close to home as I could. Like I knew I would basically be going at least to Braintree and then having my mom pick me up at that time. Like I had already had most of this ironed out. I knew who I was going to call. I knew what I was going to do at the end of the day. I had all my stuff with me to go home. Like, and she goes, like, really violent language, really belligerent behavior, like, totally making me feel, I was like, look, I don't have finances. This isn't what I agreed to, and I don't have finances to do another week of travel like this. Is there any way you're going to do any type of travel reimbursement, or like, is there any way I'm going to get reimbursed for what I've already spent? Because this is totally incoherent and inconceivable and doesn't align, you know, with anything. I feel really nauseous right now, and it's literally like the same amount of heart palpitations and stuff happening. So I really had already gotten to the point where like I saved every single punch card for the train. I saved every single like receipt that I could. Obviously cabs don't give you receipts, but like when I was loading the cards on like the Metro machines where you load the cards and like do stuff like that, I had saved the receipts from those. I had like literally the couple of like, there was one day where I bought my self-lunch or whatever. So I basically put everything from the trip together because I got to the point where I was like, by day 4, I had felt uncomfortable enough that I knew that I needed to start like keeping an account of what was going on because it just didn't seem right. And again, desperate for work, had already accepted at least a partially inconvenient training from a company willing to give me a shot, willing to give them a shot. And so I just went through everything in my head. I was like, there's nobody left that I can borrow money for training from. I don't understand what's happening. And obviously, like, I got to the point where I was like, I've been bending over backwards, making accommodations for your sudden needs and sudden changes in behavior and your sudden, like, ridiculous specifications that you never ran by me in the first place. And I felt like really lied to, felt really cheated. I was like, hey, like, I agreed to work in a location in New Bedford. This is where I'm from. You didn't ask me about traveling to one place or another, like, when you told me any of this. And she was like, basically made it really clear that if I didn't do another week of training that she wasn't going to be able to keep me. So I was like in literal tears leaving that office that day. I basically got to the point where like these poor people, like literally a day in the life, like in the span of the beginning to the end of the day, saw me go through, like, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really glad to have met you all. And like, I shared with them some of the concerns that I had about whatever. They said, oh yeah, you know, a lot of that is still in development. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, there were a couple like small red flags where it was like, oh yeah, and the New Bedford location like isn't finished doing renovations, or that's what they've been telling whatever. And I'm like, well, I was told like I would go through my training and then be basically like right to work. So they either put their new hire notice up too early, and I'm like trying to go through all this in my head, which it all just popped like a cherry. Like, I had my wheel suitcase, and I basically got to the point where I was like, no, I absolutely cannot do this. And she was really nasty, really mean. The whole office had heard her be really awful and say what she had said to me. So at least there were witnesses for that part. And, you know, some of them were like making faces and couldn't believe the way that she was speaking to me. And I don't know how much of it was like just really cultural or something, but like she was coming across as like totally awful, totally belligerent, totally unprofessional language, and was just like, you know, I got to the point where I was like, I don't care what age or whoever, like nobody, like literally, I don't deserve to get talked to like this. Nobody deserves to get talked to like this. This is not, you're not gonna bully me, like literally push me and bully me into spending more and more money and putting myself further into a hole for a job that will not reimburse me, for a job that will not be accommodating. Like, I basically got to the point where I was like, my job is not here. Like, I replied to a location local to me, and getting out of that building, getting into the cab, and then like waiting at the Andover T station, like, or at the Andover train station, like by myself. Again, all of this stuff is very daunting. Like, there's a reason, like, I don't have my keys actually in front of me, but if I did, I would be like, yeah, this is my pepper spray, this is my everything that I always have on me. Because traveling like that by yourself as a young woman on a train is, even then, I was like hyper aware, hypersensitive. I had already been through the marathon and recovered from the injuries I sustained getting in and out of, getting, not really in and out, but getting out of Boston and like dealing with all the trauma related to carrying like double massage tables, getting out of the area I was in the Boston Marathon Central area. So My laptop has been acting up on me, so I'm just gonna try and wrap this up quickly. I lost like 30 or 40 minutes of footage here, so I'm going to, after trying to deal with a corrupted file that didn't work out, I'm just going to say thank you so much for listening today to what I've gone through. I was able to get a little bit of justice and was able to talk to some career counselors and different people to say what's possible here, how do I, this is not right, I don't want it to happen to other people, I don't want it to happen to the people it already happened to. And there is at least a happy ending in that I was able to get reimbursed for everything. There was, documentation filed and everything was found to be in my favor. But that still doesn't excuse. This was traumatic for me. It was basically like, you're dangling a carrot in front of a desperate person. They knew my age, they knew my circumstances. When they brought me on board, I was perfectly transparent. I was like, I don't have a car at this time. I'm basically going to be doing, I was very transparent. I said, yep, I'm going to be staying with somebody and basically taking trains to make this work for as best I can, but at least for those 3 days. And I fortunately had emails of some of those original correspondences, so thankfully those were all in my favor. I did have documentation of, I kept every single train ticket, I kept every single reload, receipt for, the cards, for the Metro cards, the couple of, meals that I did buy, and, all these different things. I had the dates, had everything, the text messages or whatever that they had sent me during that time, and it just goes to show, there are so many people desperate for work. People will apply to anything that they think is attainable to them, and it was wonderful to be able to realize, I'm not in the wrong here. This is not anything to do with me specifically, but it felt malicious. There's no way to me that it wasn't malicious after a certain point, because they knew my age, they knew who I was and where I was from. They basically, again, just offered me something that was basically a purple unicorn with green hooves. They basically didn't have a building in New Bedford, and it was not... There were so many different pieces that were not this is what I was told, this was a lie, this is what I was told, this was a lie. There were so few correct things, because they were still in not only there wasn't even an expansion stage going on. They were basically still in the drawing board expansion stage, and they were not transparent about that. They were literally in an out to get you phase. So I gotta tell you, boarding that train by myself to come back to the Boston area by myself, and I honestly stayed in South Station that day. I went from South Station to I basically tried to salvage something. Fortunately, I do know people in Boston, or I did at that time, and I basically met up with them. Was not really in good condition. I was definitely hungry by the time I got to anywhere, because I spent mascara running all these different things. Quickly cleaned up and was able to salvage at least the tail end of that day. But it was so ugly, so grueling, and I had, a boyfriend at the time that I was talking to. I told my mom, I told whoever, and people had basically been on this whole journey with me, because my cousin was like, yeah, I'm super glad that you had the job, and then she had to, realizing this exciting prospect was less and less and less and less, less and less and less and less of what they said it was going to be. And it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing, and it really shouldn't be me that felt that embarrassed. So I at least got to the point where I unfortunately returned to a state where I was back to looking for jobs and basically terrified. I was I didn't know this type of thing could happen. What if this happens again? What if whatever? So at that point I basically was only looking at companies that I could research and have a physical location that I could go to, because even when I had looked at the website before, it was like a coming soon type page or a landing page, and I think that it's really, I don't know what more I could have done. I think that they were just waiting again for somebody to sort of fall into the trap, and I'm so glad that like I ended up getting the recognition and the closure that I needed for that specific role, because it was really just terrifying to go through, and I would never wish that on, you know, maybe I would wish it on my worst enemy, but like it's incredibly awful, and it was taxing emotionally, took its toll physically, and just to go through all that and then end up back at the same square where I was, where I had already been so depressed, already been so like just questioning everything, because I had been in administrative jobs. I had never, even in my life, like at that point, I had never made minimum wage. I was always like above, because I started working, I started volunteering, and like basically went into immediately as a receptionist. Like I was making above minimum wage. Like I had never made minimum wage in my life, and here I was back to applying to like, you know, POS jobs. So that's where I was like, I got to the point in my life where I was working at Kohl's, I was working at like any seasonal job, any like regular, I worked at a liquor store for a little while, and I worked at, that was the point in my life where eventually I did get hired at David's Bridal, and that's where I kept the two co-occurring jobs, where like I was at David's rarely, and then I was still working at the liquor store, and then eventually I transitioned to just doing one, like one day somewhere, and then the rest of the time I was at David's. But it was just, I look back on all these different things I've been through, and like that specifically, like that 1 week, I felt emotionally obliterated because this stranger literally like verbally assaulted me over the phone. And just, I went back to square one, and I thought that that was rock bottom in my life. Um, there's just so much difficulty with that, but thank you again for tuning in. My goal is just to say be careful. Like, unfortunately, you will. Those are situations that are out there. Like, this is fortunately, there are more real jobs. I think like more real jobs indeed on Indeed than there are off, like of different things. Like, I think they did end up upping their criteria of what they expect on their end in order to advertise a job on Indeed, so I think there's more hurdles than just, like, the bar is not on the ground anymore. But unfortunately, like, those extra implementations were not in place in time for all of this to get, like, they basically, I don't want to say too little too late, because those things have saved other people that came after me. It just really sucks to learn the hard way. So, be safe out there if you're in New Bedford, Rhode Island areas. We're getting slammed with some snow in the very near future, so try and stay warm. See you next time.